Being a paramedic in Austin, Texas, is challenging but immensely fulfilling. The long hours and high-pressure calls can be exhausting, yet there's a deep sense of purpose in helping people on what could be the worst day of their lives. That drive to make a difference keeps me going. The job isn't always about dramatic rescues. Sometimes, it's comforting a frightened child who fell off their bike or helping an elderly person back into their chair. Every call is unique, and that unpredictability has always been a part of what I love about this work. But one call, in particular, left a lasting impact on me and changed the way I see my role forever. I first met Natalie 2 years earlier at a barbecue hosted by a mutual friend. She was outgoing, lively, and had a talent for making people feel valued. We hit it off right away. She loved hearing stories about my job, often commenting on how impressed she was by my ability to stay calm in stressful situations. Things started out great between us, but over time, cracks began to show. Her vibrant energy turned into an unrelenting need for attention. She resented my unpredictable hours and grew frustrated whenever work commitments caused me to miss plans. Our disagreements became frequent, and it became clear we were on different paths. When we broke up, it was anything but amicable. She accused me of prioritizing strangers over her and caring more about my job than our relationship. While there was some truth to her words, her intensity made any reasonable discussion impossible. When I finally ended things, she stormed out, slamming the door. I thought that was the end of it. I couldn't have been more wrong. It was a scorching June afternoon, and my partner Tim and I were working a double shift. The day had been filled with the usual summer chaos, heat stroke cases, a minor car accident, and other routine calls. Around 4 p.m., we got a dispatch for a woman in her 30s experiencing chest pains at an apartment complex. Chest pain isn't something you take lightly, so we headed over right away. We arrived at the address and grabbed our gear. Tim read the details from the dispatch tablet. Patient's name is Natalie, 32 years old. The name didn't immediately register. Natalie is a common enough name. But as we approached the door and I heard her voice calling out, "Come in," a wave of realization hit me. I turned to Tim, hesitating. "I think I know her," I said. He raised an eyebrow but didn't press. Inside, Natalie was sitting on the couch, clutching her chest and breathing heavily. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw me. "Clay," she gasped, "thank God you're here." My emotions swirled, confusion, irritation, and unease. "Natalie, what's going on?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. She explained she'd been feeling chest pressure since that morning, and it hadn't gone away. Tim began asking her routine questions while I checked her vitals. Everything looked normal. Her heart rate, blood pressure, and oxygen levels were all fine. Tim suggested we transport her to the hospital for further evaluation, but she refused, sitting up straighter. "I don't need to go to the hospital," she said firmly. "I just needed to see Clay." Tim stepped outside to give us privacy, sensing the tension. I stayed, gripping the medical bag tightly. "Natalie," I began carefully, "you called 911. This is an emergency line. You can't use it like this." She interrupted, her voice trembling. I didn't know what else to do. "You've been ignoring me, Clay. I had to get your attention." I was stunned. "Do you realize how dangerous this is?" I asked. "You're tying up emergency resources that could be saving lives." She leaned forward, her expression pleading. "You left me with nothing, Clay. You just walked away like I didn't matter." I shook my head, trying to stay composed. "How did you even know I'd be the one to respond?" She admitted it had been a gamble, saying she knew my shifts and hoped it would work. Her desperation and recklessness left me momentarily speechless. "Natalie," I said firmly, "this isn't just wrong, it's dangerous. People with real emergencies could have been put at risk." Her tears turned to anger. She accused me of abandoning her, of never loving her. I tried to de-escalate, reminding her that this wasn't the time or place. "You need help, Natalie," I said. "Talk to someone, a therapist, but not me." Her expression darkened, and she whispered, "You'll regret this." Back in the ambulance, Tim looked at me with a mix of concern and discomfort. "That was something," he said. "Yeah," I muttered, slamming the door. At the station, I reported the incident to my supervisor. The call was flagged in the system, and I was advised to file a personal report in case she tried to contact me again. Over the following weeks, mutual friends told me Natalie was asking about me and showing up at places she thought I might be. She even posted cryptic messages on social media clearly aimed at me. The experience was a sobering reminder of how easily boundaries can be crossed and how dangerous that can become. Natalie's actions weren't just manipulative, they jeopardized lives. As paramedics, we're trained to handle medical emergencies, but nothing prepares you for the emotional weight of situations like this. To anyone in a field where personal and professional boundaries blur, take these moments seriously. Set firm boundaries, protect yourself, and never underestimate how far someone might go to regain control. After a tough breakup, the thought of starting fresh with someone new felt overwhelming. But after nearly a year, I finally felt ready to move forward. Her name was Jenna, and we connected instantly. She had a warmth about her, an easygoing nature, and a laugh so contagious it made everything seem brighter. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful about what was ahead. As a fitness trainer with long, demanding hours, having someone who brought a sense of calm and balance to my hectic life was a breath of fresh air. We spent our first weeks together hiking, trying new restaurants, and simply enjoying each other's company. Things were going smoothly, until the text arrived. It was a Tuesday evening after a client session when my phone buzzed. The message was from my ex, Megan. It read simply, "Be careful." 2 words, and yet they stopped me in my tracks. Megan and I had broken up a year earlier. While our split hadn't been perfect, it wasn't filled with drama either, or so I thought. I hadn't heard from her since, and the sudden message caught me off guard. That evening, I showed Jenna the text. She shrugged it off. "She's probably just being petty," she said. "Don't let it get to you." I agreed, figuring Megan was just trying to stir up trouble. I blocked her number and moved on. In hindsight, I should have paid more attention. A week later, I walked out of the gym after a late shift to find 2 of my tires slashed. Initially, I thought it was random vandalism, maybe a prank. But 3 days later, the same thing happened, this time in the parking lot of Jenna's apartment building. "Do you think it's Megan?" Jenna asked, her voice tinged with concern. I hesitated, not wanting to jump to conclusions. "I don't know," I admitted. "She'd have to know where we are. It seems like a lot of effort just to mess with me." But the coincidences were becoming too glaring to ignore. From that point on, I became hyper-aware of my surroundings. I double-checked locks, looked over my shoulder when heading to my car, and grew increasingly uneasy. Jenna teased me for being paranoid, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then things escalated. My phone started acting strangely, glitches, random restarts. At first, I brushed it off as a technical issue. But soon I noticed something far more disturbing, messages between Jenna and me disappearing, and new, unsettling ones appearing. One fake message sent from my number chilled me to the core, "You're not safe with me." I immediately showed Jenna, who was just as alarmed as I was. "Who would do this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied, "but I'm going to find out." A client of mine with tech expertise examined my phone. His findings confirmed my worst fear: someone had hacked it. The access point was traced back to Megan's email account. My stomach sank. Megan had gone from sending cryptic texts to actively invading my life. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Jenna and I were having lunch at an outdoor cafe when I spotted her, Megan, standing across the street. She wasn't hiding. She was staring directly at us, arms crossed, a smirk on her face. "Is that her?" Jenna asked, following my gaze. "Yeah," I muttered, frozen. Before I could decide how to react, Megan crossed the street and walked straight up to our table. Her presence was electric with tension. "So, this is the new girlfriend," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Megan, leave," I said firmly. "This isn't the time or place." She ignored me, turning to Jenna. "You should know he's not who you think he is," she said, her voice rising. "He'll leave you just like he left me. You're wasting your time." "Megan, stop," I said, standing to block her. But she continued, her words turning into a barrage of accusations and insults. Other patrons began to stare. Jenna's face was pale with fear, and anger surged within me. "That's enough," I said, stepping between them. Megan's expression twisted into something unrecognizable. "You think you can just walk away from me," she spat. "After everything we've been through? You don't get to move on like this." The situation exploded when Megan grabbed Jenna's arm, trying to pull her from the table. That was the final straw. I called the police. When officers arrived, Megan tried to play the victim, claiming I had led her on and that she just wanted to talk. But the messages on my phone and the slashed tires told a different story. The officers took her into custody for harassment. Watching her being handcuffed was surreal. Part of me felt relieved, another part felt an inexplicable sadness. This was someone I had once cared for deeply, someone I thought I knew. Now, she was a stranger, and a dangerous one. In the weeks that followed, Jenna and I changed our routines, avoided familiar places, and took extra precautions. I even bought a new phone and changed my number. While the restraining order brought some peace of mind, the emotional toll lingered. Every text notification, every unexpected knock at the door, sent a ripple of anxiety through me. "Do you think she'll come back?" Jenna asked one night, her voice quiet. "I don't know," I admitted. "But we'll be ready if she does." Looking back, I wish I had taken Megan's initial message more seriously. "Be careful" seemed cryptic at the time, but it was a warning, a glimpse into the lengths she was willing to go. This experience taught me to never ignore red flags, no matter how small they might seem. When someone's emotions spiral into obsession, the consequences can be dangerous. Ending things with Sean was one of the most difficult choices I've ever had to make. We were together for 3 years, and for much of that time, he seemed like the ideal partner, thoughtful, charming, and always able to make me laugh. But as time went on, another side of him began to emerge. He became possessive, controlling, and overly intense. Our arguments grew more frequent, and his tendency to hold grudges weighed heavily on me. I realized I couldn't stay in the relationship any longer. At first, the breakup seemed calm and mature. Sean didn't argue or raise his voice, instead, he said quietly, "I understand. I just want you to be happy." Walking away from his apartment that day, I felt a sense of relief, thinking we had avoided the drama that often comes with breakups. But I soon realized that his calm demeanor wasn't acceptance, it was a facade for something far darker. 2 weeks after the breakup, I was at work wrapping up a meeting when the receptionist informed me I had a package waiting. I wasn't expecting anything, but the idea of a surprise cheered me up. The box was small, wrapped in brown paper without a return address. Inside was a framed photo of Sean and me from a trip to Cape Cod the previous summer, along with a handwritten note, "For the good times." At first, I thought it was sentimental, strange, but harmless. I assumed Sean was reminiscing as he processed the breakup. I tucked the frame into a drawer and decided not to respond. But then another package arrived at my apartment a week later. This one was a long, rectangular box like the kind florists use. Expecting flowers, I opened it, only to find a dozen dead roses, their petals brittle and blackened. Beneath them was a note in Sean's unmistakable handwriting: "This is what happens when love dies." I froze, my stomach sinking. My first instinct was to call him, but something stopped me. The note didn't feel like an apology or a plea to reconnect, it felt like a deliberate attempt to unsettle me. And it worked. From then on, every knock at the door or unexpected package made my heart race. I began avoiding places Sean might frequent, worried about running into him. A third package arrived soon after, left directly on my doorstep. It was a small box with no markings, taped shut. Inside was a folded piece of paper, thicker than the previous notes. Unfolding it, I realized it was a list titled "Things I Loved About You." At first, the entries seemed sweet. Your laugh. The way you care about others. Your determination at work. But as I read further, I noticed several items were angrily crossed out, with annotations beside them: "Your laugh, too loud sometimes. The way you care about others, but not me. Your determination at work, more like obsession." The final entry sent a chill down my spine: "How you belong to me." Unlike the others, it wasn't crossed out. It was circled repeatedly, as if to emphasize its importance. After that, I started keeping my blinds closed and even asked my landlord to install a security camera above my apartment entrance. One night, I came home late and noticed a shadow lingering near the parking lot. My pulse quickened as I fumbled with my keys, rushing to get inside. By the time I looked out the window, the shadow was gone, but the fear lingered. I debated going to the police, but I didn't think a few unsettling packages and vague encounters were enough to file a report. Instead, I confided in a coworker, who offered to walk me to my car after work and check in regularly. While his support helped, it didn't completely ease the growing dread. The final package arrived a month after the breakup. It was left on my doorstep again, despite the security camera. When I reviewed the footage, all I could see was a hooded figure approaching my door, the video too grainy to reveal their identity. This box was heavier than the others. Inside, I found an empty picture frame, its glass pristine, its edges polished. Tucked inside was a single piece of paper with a chilling message: "Now you have nothing." That night, I finally called the police. The officer who came to my apartment listened attentively as I explained everything: the packages, the notes, the shadow in the parking lot. He filed a report and strongly urged me to get a restraining order. "It's better to act now before this escalates," he said. The process of getting a restraining order was complicated, but it gave me a small sense of control. Sean denied everything when questioned, claiming I was overreacting. "I was just trying to be thoughtful," he said. But his actions told a different story. I changed my locks and avoided being out alone, constantly looking over my shoulder. Even now, I can't shake the memory of those packages or the fear they brought. I wonder what Sean's true intentions were. Were they meant to scare me, manipulate me, or were they simply the desperate actions of someone who couldn't move on? Whatever the reason, they served as a reminder of how quickly love can twist into something threatening. If something feels wrong, trust your instincts. Sometimes, the people we think we know best are the ones we should fear the most. When my relationship with Ethan ended, I thought I could finally start fresh. We had been together for 2 years, and though things started off well, our differences became impossible to ignore. I craved stability, while he thrived on unpredictability. We broke up in March, and it seemed amicable at the time. We talked, shed a few tears, and wished each other the best. But looking back, I realize how much I overlooked in those final moments. Adjusting to life after the breakup wasn't easy, but as a middle school teacher, my busy schedule kept me occupied. By April, I was beginning to feel like myself again, settling into routines like grading papers at coffee shops, taking evening bike rides, and reconnecting with friends. That fragile sense of normalcy was shattered one afternoon when I noticed something strange. I was at a coffee shop, pulling my laptop out of my bag, when a small black square fell onto the table. At first, I assumed it was a USB drive or some gadget a student might have slipped into my bag, but the longer I looked at it, the less familiar it seemed. It was sleek and unmarked, with no indication of what it was. Thinking it was useless, I tossed it in the trash and moved on. A few days later, I encountered something similar. While locking up my bike outside the grocery store, I noticed a small device clipped underneath the seat. It looked almost identical to the first one, same size, same black casing. I felt a knot of unease in my stomach but brushed it off as a coincidence. Maybe it had been stuck there by accident. Still, as I rode home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Weeks passed, and the strange occurrences faded from my mind. But then, my car started making a strange rattling noise. Expecting a minor issue, I brought it to a mechanic. When he came into the waiting room holding a small device, my heart dropped. "Found this under your bumper," he said, handing it to me. "It's a GPS tracker." I stared at the device, struggling to process his words. "A tracker?" I repeated, barely able to get the words out. "Yeah," he said. "People use these for fleet vehicles or other reasons." Someone had been tracking my car. I stuffed the device into my pocket, thanked him, and drove home, my mind racing. Who could have done this? Was it Ethan? The idea seemed absurd. He'd always been so calm, even during disagreements. But who else would know so much about my routines? When I got home, panic set in. I tore through my belongings, searching for anything that didn't belong. My purse, gym bag, jackets, everything was a potential hiding place. That's when I found it, another tracker, stitched sloppily into the lining of my backpack. My heart pounded as I stared at the tiny device. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone was deliberately following me. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept checking the locks on my doors and windows, convinced someone was outside, watching. The idea that Ethan might be behind this started to feel less far-fetched. He knew my favorite spots, my schedule, and even where I parked my car. I decided to confront him. I couldn't live with the fear any longer. I called and made sure to keep my tone casual. "Hey, Ethan. Can we talk? Something weird has been happening, and I just need to clear the air." He agreed to meet at a park we used to visit. The sun was setting when I arrived, and he was already there, leaning against a bench. "I've been finding tracking devices," I said, cutting straight to the point. "In my bag, on my car, even in my backpack. Do you know anything about this?" His face registered surprise, then defensiveness. "What? No. Why would I do that?" "Ethan, I'm not stupid," I said, my voice firm. "Who else would it be?" After a long pause, his gaze shifted away. "I just wanted to make sure you were safe," he admitted. "You're out there alone now, and I didn't want anything to happen to you." Anger and disbelief surged through me. "You think stalking me is keeping me safe? Do you even hear yourself?" He tried to justify his actions, insisting he meant no harm and was only looking out for me. But his words only made me angrier. I told him to stay away from me and never contact me again. The next day, I filed a police report and began the process of getting a restraining order. The officers were understanding but honest. "These cases can be tough to prove," one said. "Even with a restraining order, there's no guarantee he'll stop." I informed my neighbors about the situation and asked them to call the police if they saw Ethan near the building. I started parking my car in different spots and varying my routine, hoping to make myself harder to track. But the paranoia remained. For the next week, I noticed a car parked on the street near my apartment that looked like Ethan's. It wasn't there every day, but when it was, my stomach would twist in knots. I wasn't sure if it was his car or just a coincidence, but the resemblance was enough to keep me on edge. As the weeks passed, the cars stopped appearing, and the strange devices stopped showing up. Maybe it was never him, or maybe he finally decided to move on. Either way, the experience left a lasting mark on me. I've learned to take precautions, but the fear still lingers. Even now, I check my car and bags for trackers out of habit. It's a hard lesson, but it taught me to trust my instincts. Sometimes, the people we think we know best are the ones we should be most cautious of. That little voice in your head? It might just be the thing that keeps you safe.